if you stop going to work today,
Mhm.
how do you pay your bills? If if you stop going to work next year, how do you pay your bills? I think it's a question that we don't zoom out enough to ask ourselves, right? So we get all of these things that we have to pay for, and we take for granted the only way in which we pay for these things is because we go to work every day. So how do I ever stop going to work?
According to the doomers and crash bros who simply do not care about you, they just want to get paid. The American dream is dead. Buying a home is impossible. You should just YOLO and give up, FOMO it, and just go enjoy life because you are destined not to own a home. So I want to talk to one and only Mr. Brian Adamson and ask him specifically, is the American dream dead? Brian?
Oh, there's so many different ways we can go with this. Mike, I'm so happy to be back. It's been too long. Happy to be back, man. And of course, we will open up with such a topic. So, first of all, what is the American dream? I think I got to start there.
Yeah. So I think that is fair. The American dream, or at least the part of the American dream I'm referring to in this opening, is home ownership, right?
Right.
Home ownership, when you look at the statistics, has always ranged somewhere between 67 and 69-ish%. So most people, well more than 2/3 of people, own a home.
Hmm.
And there is a rather large doomish headline that says it's impossible. You should give up. We are going to become a nation of renters, right? Renter nation. And I wanted to ask you, are we headed to renter nation? Is it over? Is homeownership a pipe dream? We're never going to get there?
So, first of all, I think buying a home is one of the easiest things that you can do. I just believe that. I believe that um there's parameters, there's metrics. If you hit those parameters and those metrics, then you could buy a home. I've never wanted to buy a home and couldn't. I'll just put it
Right.
that way, right?
Right.
And I bought my first primary residence when I was 22, almost 23, fresh out of college, built a new construction home in 2007, right?
Mm.
So, it, yeah. Now, is that the American dream? I don't know, right? I think
All
that
right.
could be the American nightmare for a lot of people, right? Because um, well, let's just call it what it is. Like your primary residence is most people's biggest liability, not an asset, right? And so unless you leverage the equity in it, unless you rent it out for a profit, unless you sell it for a profit, it is a liability for the time in which you reside in it, because the definition of an asset is something that pays you cash flow, and the definition of a liability is something that you pay for. So while you're in it, until you do one of those things, one of those three things, it is a liability. So that's why I said, is it the American dream or the American nightmare? Because for most people, unless they are doing things like we do, Mike, and that's look for different ways to supplement and diversify your income, that is the start of the rat race for many people. Because first it starts with the house, then it gets a couple cars, you get a couple kids. I don't know if you call yours assets or liabilities, but they're expensive. And then at the end of it, you're stuck in this thing 20, 30 years trying to figure out how to get out.
Well, let's poke at this a little bit. So absolutely, Rich Dad Poor Dad, I think gets credit for kind of introducing this concept that the house is a liability, not an asset. I
Hmm.
think a lot of the financial literature up until that point just, hey, it's on the balance sheet as an asset. The liability is over here. The net's the equity. So of course it's an asset. I
Yeah.
think the wrinkle, which I think is fair, is assets
Hmm.
produce, cash flow, right? So I
Hmm.
think that's a fair comparison. But I think what you're putting at is what is called the rat race. It's funny that you bring this up. I had no idea we're going here. I have a custom T-shirt that's available on my website, one rental at a time, every month. And it's funny that this month just started July 1st, and it's escape the rat race. It's a rat sitting in a hammock between two palm trees, holding on to my logo, right? The purple house. It's hilarious that we're here.
That's
Um,
correct.
so so again, that's how you do it, right? You got to produce assets, you got to own assets for the long term, and you get out of the rat race. But yeah, the American dream, the American nightmare. Home ownership, if done without a plan,
Hmm.
you're absolutely right, can become a nightmare, right? How many people, I mean, I've seen headlines, and I'm not sure whether to feel sorry for these people or smack them because they're idiots. I kind of waver between two. So what do I mean by that? They buy a house. They estimate taxes and insurance. And then a year goes by and taxes get reassessed because the purchase price went up. Insurance goes up because it's a new build or whatever.
Hmm.
And suddenly, what they thought was a $1,200 mortgage payment turns into a $1,600 mortgage payment because escrow went up.
Hmm.
I've seen lots of people kind of squawk at that. And I'm like, do we blame them for not understanding how taxes and insurance work and just like, okay, I understand the education system sucks? Or do we smack them for saying you guys are not taking care of yourself first? I don't know how to feel about that.
That's tough. I would say for the average homeowner, I would have to have a little bit of empathy for them
I
because
think
I
that's
think that
fair.
the education surrounding it, you know, the vested interest of all parties involved, whether it's a new build, whether it's a realtor bringing you a property, look, it is what it is. Most realtors not educating you on the fact of what's going to happen after you sign this and they get their commission, right?
I agree
Um,
with that. For a
you know,
homeowner, it's they buy one or two in their lifetime. I think that's fair. Empathy, I
yeah,
think, is the right answer.
yeah. But for the investor, however, oh, you deserve everything you get,
It's,
right? Because
yes,
as an investor, we need to be educated on investing because otherwise you're not taking risk, you're gambling. And so I think that there's a fundamental responsibility of us as investors to understand all the dynamics and parameters around what's going to happen over the horizon of this investment. We can't buy with emotion as a consumer does because they absorb those things, whereas we need to hedge and mitigate against those things.
it's funny when we talk about investors. I've always seen people attracted to Burr, right? By
Hmm.
um, fix up, rent, all of that, and repair. That's the R I was thinking of: buy, repair, rent, refi, repeat. And it's always been tough for people. It's sold as sexy. It's sold as easy. I think it's an advanced strategy because there's failure points at each of those.
Sure,
It can be amazing. You and I have done it, I don't know, 50 plus times and it's worked out.
for
But I
sure.
always see new people diving in because they see it's easy and they fail at all kinds of points. And I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of people failing today because of insurance and tax surprises, which to your point, if you're an investor, you shouldn't be off by that much, or you shouldn't be doing skinny deals. What do you think of all that?
Yeah, I think that's solid. You and I could point back to I think it was Norris or Doris Drive for you. It was
Mm-hmm.
Aberdeen Street for me. Where we went in and we did the Bird method back before they called it that, and got into a situation where we got a little bit over leverage, and it
We
was
did.
doomed thereafter, right? So
Yep.
I think it's so interesting, and you probably get this a lot, Mike. Almost every new investor I talk to that wants to buy cash flow immediately says, "I want to burr a property," and I'm like,
Yeah.
that sounds great, but do you really understand what that means, though? Right? Because like in any situation in any relationship, there's a give and take, and there is a give and take. While yes, you can go and extract equity, and yes, well, the bank's DSCR, they said that they're willing to give me a 1 point. It's not about what they're willing to give you. They're giving you
Yes.
that predicated on what the taxes and insurance are based on whatever formula that they ran. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work specifically to your market and to your deal. And so what happens is right now, I saw an article, insurance premiums are up 35% over last year. And I'm sure that's impacting different sectors of the country differently because of natural disasters and such. But the bottom line is, if you're playing too close to the edge, if you are getting away with the minimum DSCR requirement, and then you have an uptick in insurance and taxes, you now have a liability. And let's
Trouble.
hope that
Yep.
there's some equity in it because that's the only thing that could classify it as an asset steal. Otherwise, you got negative cash flow. If you can't keep up with the burn rate and you can't pass through those extraneous costs to the consumer, then you got to be figuring out how you're going to sell this thing and probably at a loss at that point.
No, you got to get out. And you're absolutely right. Norris Drive was a cash flow asset for us for a couple of years. I went in and did a cash out refi to your point. The bank asked me how much I could get. I said, how much do I want? I said, how much could I get? They gave it to me.
Yeah.
I did not, Brian. I'm embarrassed to say it, but it is true. I didn't even think about the mortgage payment.
Yeah.
When I ended up getting the mortgage payment after the refi, I don't remember the numbers, but they were something like this. My rent was 1100, ten ninety
Yeah,
five to be exact. My
yeah.
mortgage payment was something like 1312 or 1326 or something like. I was
Like
guaranteed to
my
lose
deal
money.
was identical to that. Literally,
Yeah,
my deal was identical to that.
it's crazy. That and again, the bank gave me it because again, why? It was a residential loan. And if you guys don't know, in a residential property, they were banking it on my income, not
Hmm.
the asset. Very different than commercial.
Hmm.
And dude, I carried that thing for almost 2 years before I sold it. And believe me, I was thankful to get rid of that freaking liability around my neck.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I had the same exact thing happen. I bought a property in 2009 for 28 grand cash. I previously had a mortgage on it. I lost it when the market contracted, and then this thing came up again. I'm like, that looked like a good buy. I'm familiar with
Nah,
that property. You know what I
I know
mean?
that one.
Yeah, I know that one. So I went back and bought it for 28 cash. And I mean, it had phenomenal cash flow. Like started out at like 900, 1,000, got up to 1,100, and it stayed there. It had a good long-term tenant. And some 7 years into it, I'm like, oh, I can pull money out of this thing. And went and did it. I think it was a loan for like, it was 68 or 72,000 or something like that. But based on where rates were, um, I ended up in the same situation. The pity payment was $1,300 and my rent was 1,100. Now I'm thinking, because now I got this cash on hand, well, I'm just gonna go get busy, buy some more properties, not thinking of the fact that I got negative rents every single month. $200 don't seem like a lot until everything else started happening in addition to the $200, right? And
Exactly.
and not to mention, if for whatever reason the tenant leaves, and now that's a lot more than $200. It's actually $1,300. So
Yeah.
I agree with you. Like it's really silly to think how ignorant that we could have been at one point in time,
Yeah.
but it happens to all of us, and those are the best experiences to teach you not to ever let that happen again.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to this American dream thing because I'm not sure where we're going to go with this. We do have this notion of renter nation. We do have this notion it's impossible. Both you and I know that's not true. It can be done. But
Hmm.
maybe, I think maybe the question is, should it be done? Let's say for a minute you're talking to a family member. We're not talking brother, sister. We're talking aunt, uncle, cousin, kind of that
Okay.
circle, right?
Yeah.
And they're coming to you saying, Brian, I've got this down payment money. Should I buy a home, my first time home? We're not talking forever home, we're talking entry level. Or should I buy a rental and just keep renting? I know you probably have 1,000 questions. If you want to ask a couple, go for it. But I think this is a consideration a lot of people are going to have is should I buy my entry level home
Yeah.
or should I keep renting and buy a rental? What do you think?
So my first question would be, what's your cash reserves like? I think if they have enough cash reserves to make the purchase and have some
Yeah.
liquidity
Extra. Yep.
extra, I would tell them to buy the rental first.
Okay.
I would
Okay.
I would tell most people to buy a couple of rentals, establish cash flow, because that's going to help you offset this thing called a liability when you
Mm-hmm.
buy it, right? Your primary residence. And so, because I think the part that nobody ever considers is, and I asked this question, I had an event last week and I asked this question. If if you stop going to work today,
Mm-hmm.
how do you pay your bills? If if you stop going to work next year, how do you pay your bills? I think it's a question that we don't zoom out enough to ask ourselves, right? So we get all of these things that we have to pay for, and we take for granted the only way in which we pay for these things is because we go to work every day. So how do I ever stop going to work? Do I get rid of
Yeah.
the thing?
Yeah, dude, this rat race is nasty, right? We're the image of a rat running on a reel. Um, Actually, I have it right here. This cash flow game,
Mm-hmm.
if you haven't played this, play it. There is
For
so
sure.
much truth in this.
For sure.
The numbers are different, but the story, if you really want to have fun with this, play with four people. Have two people one person be a doctor, one person be a lawyer, have the other two people be a teacher and a policeman, and watch what happens.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's
It's
crazy
crazy.
what happens.
The,
So
the,
yeah.
the, 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 I think one time I played with my family, I was the janitor. And I want to
Yeah.
say I got free before one of them did, and they were the doctor. Like the game is phenomenal.
Yeah. Oh, I'll guarantee. So I played this game 100 times. I
Hmm.
played it so much that, I just have fun with it. If you're the doctor and I'm the janitor, I will beat you 95 times out of 100.
I believe that. I believe it.
Because, because again, and this is why I tell people all the time, if I was to do this all over again, I would, if I could live somewhere where I could have, my monthly bills paid with 50,000 bucks,
Hmm.
I could get out of the rat race in 5 years or less.
For sure.
However, if you live in the Silicon Valley and your nut is 20 grand,
Hmm.
that's going to take you 10 or 15 years,
Yeah.
right?
So
Because it's
let me
just,
ask you this, Mike. This just came to me as we having this conversation.
yeah.
Why do you think it's even considered the American dream to be a homeowner?
Oh, I think that's marketing. It's propaganda. It's how banks make money with lending. It's part of the financial system.
Hmm.
It's all of that. But I
Hmm.
will say, at least for the past generations,
Hmm.
certainly through the boomers, probably through Generation X, we can't we can't not acknowledge the reality that the lion's share of net worth of
Hmm.
those generations
Hmm.
is their home.
That's
You can't argue it.
that's true.
It's a fact.
That's true.
Um, and I'll even go one step further. It's a little bit too early to tell, but I would be willing to bet millennials and Gen Z will be the same thing. Inflation is a feature,
Mhm.
not a bug. People don't get that. Inflation is a feature, not a bug. So if you believe that, you want to own assets, preferably assets with long fixed rate debt,
Yeah,
i.e., 30 years,
for sure.
and you just want to hold it. You're going to
Yeah.
be paying off today's debt with tomorrow's dollars. And
Yeah.
if it's a rental, you're going to be paying off today's debt with somebody else's tomorrow's dollars.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
in it's I believe that inflation is part of our system. And if you
For sure.
understand it, you invest a certain way.
For sure. I couldn't agree with you more. The thing that I'm most concerned about with home ownership now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I agree with you 1000%. My parents probably wouldn't have had a net worth if it wasn't for being a homeowner, right?
Ditto. Ditto.
Gen X, and I guess I don't know what's the cutoff for Gen X, but I mean my dad is 70 something now. So
He's a boomer.
he's a
He's a
boomer
boomer.
for sure, right? So, but when you look at that, these were people who were lucky to have one home in their entire lifetime, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Two, like they're killing it. So
Mm-hmm.
I say that to say this. I think that because of the length of time that they would live in said property and keep it is the factor that garnered them the wealth, right? Whereas I think for the tail end of the millennials, which is probably my age, into Gen Z, they're not going to stay there long enough, I think, to gain the benefit. So I think in their
Yeah.
particular case, they're hopping around. Now, obviously, what happened to rates during COVID has skewed this, what I'm about to say a little bit, but from a
Mm-hmm.
general consensus, I think they hop around every 3 to 5 to 7 years if rates weren't a factor.
That's interesting to poke at a little bit because I do think you're right. When I think about my parents and it sounds like your parents, I mean, my parents never moved.
Hmm.
I think they bought that house in Sunnyvale, California. I'm gonna say in '77.
Hmm.
My mother sold it in like God, I don't know when she sold that, like 2012, 2014. So
Yep.
that's the only house I've ever known.
Yep.
Right? They were renters before that, but I don't remember those. So I was the only, like, to your point, right? And the other thing that's in that is, again, that generation, good or bad, their goal was to work at the same place and get the gold watch after 40 years.
100%.
Today, I think you're right. I do think average tenure is down. We don't have pensions anymore. It's definitely self paid with 401k, so very different. I do think average tenure is down. I do think we're far more mobile, but I don't know if that's a bad thing. You know, I don't know if that's a bad thing.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I do think though it further illustrates the point to me that people have to be investors in real estate
Yeah.
more than homeowners, right?
Yeah.
Because I think holding an investment property long term is probably more likely of a scenario to be able to gain wealth and hedge against inflation, as
Yeah.
opposed to if all things were equal rates, that people would just they would get in and out every opportunity that they could.
Yeah. No, I mean, the whole key, I mean, there's actually been studies on stocks. I believe it's the same in real estate. Do you know what portfolio has the best return when you look historically?
I don't.
The answer is dead people because they don't trade. So that's I'm not even it's the truth. You know what the second one is? The people that forgot they had it.
Hey, that's a
Again,
good. That's
they
a
don't
good one.
trade.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
don't trade, right?
sure, for sure.
So I think you're right. I think the people that try to time the market, get in and out, end up net losing.
Hmm.
But I go back to one of the people that I've had on the channel, one of the great followers of my channel. Her name is Sarah. Now, in her case, she was a military. She served the military for 20 plus years. So what
Okay.
she did is she bought a home every time her duty station changed.
Mm,
Now, she did this a little bit different, which I applaud her for, and I would ask everybody to think about. Every time she changed her duty station, she had children too, right?
okay.
Um, so she would buy a home with their VA loan, 0%
Hmm.
down,
Hmm.
which she could reuse because her duty station was changed.
Hmm.
But what she would buy was something that would turn into a positive cash flow rental the next time her duty station changed. So
Was her
she
name
didn't,
Sarah?
Sarah,
Shout out to
Sarah.
Sarah. I like that. I like Sarah already.
So what Sarah found out is, hey, I'm going to buy this for my family to live in. There's,
Yeah.
4 or 5 of us, but we know we're not going to be here forever. So
Hmm.
I'm going to buy something that will be a positive cash flow rental when we ultimately move. I
I
think
like
that is genius. So if
that
you
energy
go into this with that mindset, I think you're a winner
for sure.
because again, lowest down payment, best rates. You move every, 2 years. Who cares? Get another one. I think
Yeah.
I think that's a winning attitude. What do you think?
Man, that's amazing, Mike. But think about the average consumer. I mean, just
I
being
I
honest,
agree. I
they
agree.
they aren't thinking remotely close to that. As a matter of fact, they're trying to get as much house as the bank will absolutely allow,
You're right.
all the way up to the very edge of the top of the market with no equity in it. So they're not in position to rent these things out when they want to exit them. They don't
Uh,
cash flow.
no, they don't because they're I so here's the point of all of this, and I think Sarah is the unlock. I believe home ownership for most people, including Gen Z, again, historically speaking, will be the best asset they own if they keep it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But to your point, don't push it. Don't have an alligator. I'll say it again. If you own a rental or a burr and you do what I did and you went from positive 200 to negative 400, sell that thing.
yeah,
I could not, dude, it killed me. I had to go to work 6, 7, 8 hours a week to pay for somebody else to live in my home.
yeah.
That is horrible. Don't do that.
Yeah, for sure. No, I remember that pain like it was yesterday. And I remember the city was called Southfield that this property was in Michigan. And they just kept reassessing the taxes. They were doubling year over year. It was unbelievable. I think at the height when I sold it, they were like $6,300 on a
Oh,
1,000 square foot ranch home, right? It was insane. And
that's crazy.
yeah, I wish I would have just left it free and clear how I had it, man. But you live and you learn, you know?
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Well, this again, folks, let us know in the comments below. Where do you come in on this? A, is the American dream dead or is it alive? Just say dead or alive in the comments below. And then second, what do you think of what Sarah did? Is it genius? Is it the unlock? Or do you have other ideas? Brian, where can people find you?
Brian Adamson official on YouTube, Instagram, and everywhere else.
There you go, buddy. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming back. We missed you.
Hey man, I'm happy to be back, Mike.
There you go.